Hey, you guys, this is Irene. So I wanted to do this video because Cynthia G did a video, which I will link at the end of mine, regarding two Moorish sovereign citizens who were caught squatting in Davidson Mayor's parents' home, and ultimately they were arrested. Now, for those of you who don't know who the Moors are, or the Moorish sovereign citizens are, they are a basically an offshoot of the sovereign citizen movement. And the difference is that they have like I guess, an Afrocentric take on the sovereign citizen belief system. Now, the reason this was intriguing to me is because I actually have a lot of sovereign citizens that come to my page, and a lot of Moorish people who come to my page, namely because of the fact that I have videos up like, my home birthing video. I have videos up like how you can liberate your children, and that, you don't need to get them social security cards and birth certificates, things like that. And so when people see those videos, I think some people think I am a sovereign citizen, that I believe in those beliefs, which I don't. The one thing I will say is, on my videos, what you will notice is that I reference actual law, and I reference it in context. Also, what you'll notice about my videos is that I don't get into the weirdness of uppercase, lowercase letters. I'm not going to tell you to do things like say you don't want your social security card and mail it back to the social security agency. I'm not going to tell you to not, pay your taxes if you have a social security number. I'm not going to encourage people to do things that are legitimately going to get them in trouble. But what I will do is I like to inform people of the law. So what I will do is I will go to the Social Security Act. We can read that together. I'll demonstrate how you can obtain your passport without a birth certificate or Social Security card. I will do things of that nature. But I'm not a sovereign citizen. And what I find with a lot of these movements is that they tend to they tend to do things such as mix factual information with absolute insanity. Okay, and so I when I saw Cynthia G's video, I thought this Moorish couple was actually a really good example of that happening, because a lot of times people will watch a YouTube video. They have like a revolutionary heart. They know something is wrong with the system, and so they get sucked into these weird sovereign citizen movements. And a lot of people get into a great deal of trouble. One thing you'll find that sovereign citizens encourage you to do, which makes me feel like these movements are CIA backed, is they will tell you to be hyper combative with the government. So they will insist that, you're constantly, seeking writs against officials, that you're constantly engaging the system. Somebody like me would tell you to be as off-grid as possible, to engage the government as little as possible. So I want to use this example with this Moorish couple squatting in a house, and show how a lot of what sovereign citizens are told to do is part factual legal stuff and part weirdness, because there is something called adverse possession. And I'm going to demonstrate that with law. I'm going to look at California law and Texas law for adverse possession. And we're going to talk about what the law really is, and how you can truthfully use the law, and how that differs from what they actually did, and why it's very dangerous to get caught up in these movements. So again, I'm definitely like, for example, now actually is, if anybody runs a credit check for me, for example, it's not almost like I don't exist. So Experian, TransUnion, they'll say they can't verify that I'm a person because I'm off the grid, right? My children don't have birth certificates, they don't have social security cards, things like that. So I believe in disengaging from the system as much as you can, but I also think you have to actually read laws and use good common sense and not get caught up in YouTube videos and weird CIA-backed movements that are designed to expose troublesome individuals. And I think you really put yourself more at risk when you align to these things. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can just watch the news clip of these Moorish sovereign citizens. And then we're going to go to the real law. Okay, we're going to go to the real law that they were attempting to use in ignorance. And people do successfully utilize adverse possession. This is a real thing you can do. But it can't have anything to do with thinking that the government is a de facto government, and it can't have anything to do with being a Moorish citizen. You don't need all of that extra stuff to engage in adverse possession. You just need common sense and actual understanding of the law, and you need to do it in a legal way. So with that said, let me share my screen with you. I'm going to go ahead and play the clip. And then after I play the clip, we'll get into the actual law. Okay. So here we go. I hope there's no commercials. Let's see.
Everyone's going to cover the big stories of the day, but everyone won't be able to do it in Channel 9.
Okay, so at least the commercials about their own stuff. So in just a second, we're going to watch the news clip on these Moorish sovereign citizens, and then I'm going to discuss with you the real adverse possession laws and what exactly they did wrong.
Contacted us and said the same thing happened at the property he manages.
Eyewitness News reporter Deshaun Brown learned tonight how the courts handle situations like this and the burdens that fall on the homeowners. How does something like this keep happening?
Frustrating, to say the least.
Last night, we showed you this multi-million-dollar Davidson home. It just so happens it belongs to the mayor's family. The problem is, police said none of them were living there. Squatters were.
And so now they're in my home.
After watching forward, Michael Moorings is property manager at a house in West Charlotte. He's told us the same two squatters moved in there.
Well, the police said that we had to go through the legal system. We have to file an eviction. There's nothing they can really do.
And one of the issues is that there's not a great legal remedy.
Attorney Mark Gott said he and other colleagues have dealt with several cases just like this. Problem is, the courts are usually looking for a contract between a landlord and tenant. Most cases like this won't have that.
My understanding is that most squatters know the law better than the homeowners that own the property that they're squatting in. And maybe better than some lawyers I know.
The squatters in Davidson tried using the law to their advantage, filing their own property deed. This copy appears to be signed by the owner's family, is notarized, and if you look closely, the register even signed off on it. When I asked the county, how does something like this happen? They told me, if someone meets all the requirements, the register has to record it.
So you can file a bogus deed, and if you know how to do it, there's no problem in being able to do it. The burden then shifts to the party that you're violating to have to strike that bogus deed.
Sounds like so much of the burden in these cases is on the homeowner.
Yes, the burden and expense is on the homeowner.
And once they're in your home, oh my God. We're hoping that because it happened to the mayor last night, this will bring some attention to the small guy and we can get some recourse.
Incredibly frustrating.
Okay, so they're calling them squatters, but with that said, I want to go ahead because adverse possession, we are essentially living in the Western world, and the Western world is European controlled. And so Europe has adverse possession laws. And because Europe has them, every place that white people have colonized, have what is called adverse possession laws. Again, this is not about being a Moorish person. This is not about, you know, a de facto government. This is not about any of those things. This is just about understanding the actual law. Give me. Okay, so, oops, wrong screen. Sorry about that. So let's look at California's adverse possession law. So let's talk about the law versus what these people were essentially trying to do. And give me another second, sorry. So people have the right to keep unwanted intruders off their property. I'm reading California's adverse possession law. This is a government document that I'm reading. So this is legitimately the law of the land, right? People have the right to keep unwanted intruders off their property. They do this all the time, sometimes with fences or signs, sometimes just by asking trespassers to please stay away. In cases of serious repeated annoyance or threatened harm, landowners can call the police. They will usually warn the person to stay away. If necessary, make arrests. Trespass is a minor criminal offense, and someone convicted of criminal trespass can be fined and jailed. Another kind of trespass is more permanent, using another's property as an owner would use it. If someone drives across a neighbor's land every day, it is a trespass unless the owner has granted permission or the driver has a legal right, called an easement, to use that part of the neighbor's property. The other neighbor who just put up a fence 2 feet over the boundary line is trespassing, as is the one whose garage has been in the wrong place on the neighbor's property for several years. These trespassers also can be asked to leave or warned away, but there's a chance that any of them may in fact have a legal claim to the property. So what these Moorish people are attempting to do is adverse possession. Adverse possession can work. It can work with property. It can work with houses. It can work if you build your fence 2 feet onto your neighbor's land. That could quickly become your land. And so in California, we're going to look at what adverse possession looks like. And I think it's important to do this because, again, I'm not a sovereign citizen. I'm not a Moorish person. I do recognize that they warp real law and they get people to do a bunch of weird things, but the weird things do have a base in some legality. And so this would be the straight up legality without, you know, the backstory and the twists and turns and the, you know, weird stuff like you driving around, being a free man on the land and all of that, okay? I just skip over all the bizarre stuff and just get into the law. Because at the end of the day, even if everything these people believe is true, make no mistake that the government's going to do what they want to do. So unless we're going to have a real revolution, y'all, we need to be looking at these laws. And if you need to drop all the talk about being a free man on the land and being sovereign and all that, like just let that go. You're not sovereign. Let me just be clear. None of us are sovereign. Because if they want to throw you in a jail cell, you yelling sovereign isn't going to change that, right? So we need to live in reality. And I think that that's essential. So let's get into adverse possession, because what they did can be done. It's just they didn't know what they were doing. Many landowners are surprised to learn that under certain circumstances, a trespasser can come onto land, occupy it, and gain legal ownership of it. The trespasser may acquire a few feet of property or whole acres of property in this way. If someone is using your property, even a small strip on the edge, you should be alert to the risk. A trespasser may also gain a legal right to use part of someone else's property. This is called prescriptive easement. The legal doctrine that allows trespassers to become owners is called adverse possession. Although the name sounds nasty and the results can be, the trespasser is not necessarily an intentional evildoer. Far from it. The trespasser may simply have made a mistake. But for our purposes, y'all, this can happen, like I said, if you build your fence too far over on somebody's land, but you can purposely gain land this way. You can really do this. Like it said, and remember, we're reading from a government document right now. You can take acres of land this way. You absolutely can. I think that Moorish couple was stupid, and I'll tell you why. Because the home they were in belonged to somebody that was related to a mayor. And like I said, the rules are all well and good if you're handling business without triggering anybody with power. Because no matter what the law is, power trumps legality. And I think that's where they were very, very wrong, and they should have really checked themselves. Because I don't think the mayor's family, those were the wrong people to try to pull the game with, right? Also, they didn't go about it in the correct way. So that's problematic too. So let's move on. Requirements for obtaining land by adverse possession. Again, we are reading a government document. So I find with these freemen, Moorish people, stuff like that, they show you bits and pieces of information. They talk about law out of context. I never, ever do that in my videos. I'm not a free man, but I do believe in making educated decisions and understanding the law and making the system work for you when you choose to engage it. So I'm a big fan of adverse possession. And so let's go into, this is again for the state of California. We'll also look at Texas, and we'll look at European law regarding adverse possession too. A trespasser is entitled to legal ownership of property if his occupation of the property is hostile, actual, open, and notorious, exclusive and continuous for a period of years set by state statute. Let me go again over that. This is how you can obtain a house, acreage, any of those things legally without paying anybody any money, even if it's owned by somebody else. Let's go back over that. A trespasser is entitled, this is a government document saying this, a trespasser is entitled to legal ownership of a property if his occupation of the property is hostile, actual, like you really have to be there, open and notorious. It can't be a secret that you're living in the house. It can't be a secret that you're building on the land. It can't be a secret. People have to know about it. So it has to be hostile, actual, open and notorious, exclusive and continuous. Now, let me tell you something. Again, all of these laws stem from European law. This is a look into the white man's mind. I'm going to tell you, this is how they took over South Africa. This is how they took over the Americas. This is the law of their land. All right. And since they've taken over the United States, they occupied this land. The European laws have come, and we follow those laws in this land. I'm going to prove that a little bit later as we look into European adverse possession. So with that said, again, a trespasser is entitled to legal ownership of property if his occupation of the property is hostile, actual, open and notorious, exclusive, meaning you're not sharing it with anybody, and continuous for a period of years set by state statute. So how long you have to be hostilely, openly, and actually, exclusively, and continuously on a property for it to become yours is dependent on the state statute. Some states such as California, and this is California's government document that we're looking at, also require the trespasser to have paid local property taxes on the land. The time required, which varies from state to state, is usually 20 years. It can be as short as 5 years when the trespasser pays property taxes. Y'all, I'm telling you right now, this will be a smooth hustle for the Black community right here. is to do research. You know, there's 50 states. On the states that have the shortest adverse possession laws with the prerequisite of the payment of property taxes, we could come up in this life. I'm telling you right now, we could come up in this life because people really do gain property this way. This is perfectly legal. This is what the Moorish people are trying to do, but they just being caught up in that Moorish mindset instead of just handling business from a legal perspective really caused them to make some bad decisions. But this is a real thing that we could do communally, and we could gain a lot of land and never pay a bank and never pay an individual anything, never pay anything more than property taxes. The word hostile, and so now it's going to break down. I love California. I'm going to tell you, California is, these white people will tell each other, because they know no black people are going to read these documents, y'all. These white people will tell each other how to come up. We need to start reading more of their materials. So in California specifically, what we're talking about, they're going to break down the legality of how you gain property through adverse possession. So remember that the criteria was it had to be hostile, actual, open and notorious, exclusive, continuous, for a period of years set by state statute. And now they're about to break down all of those areas. Hostile claim. The word hostile doesn't mean that the trespasser barricades himself on the land with a shotgun. Most courts follow one of two legal definitions of hostile. One is called main rule and requires that the person be aware that they are trespassing. And then they give an example. For example, a man in Nebraska, a state which allows this rule, gained ownership of the neighboring 8 acres. This is a man in Nebraska who took 8 acres. Again, we are reading from a government document right now. By using them for years. He knew the property was not his, and a court characterized his action as hostile. So he got 8 acres of land by just using the land for a few years. And then the land became his. He knew it wasn't his land. He decided to use it anyway, and ultimately he got the land. It became his. The other popular definition, the Connecticut rule, defines hostile simply as occupation of the land. The trespasser doesn't have to know that the land belongs to someone else. The Connecticut rule, kinder to the innocent trespasser, is followed by most states today. Remember, you have to, on a state-by-state basis, understand which is going to be appropriate for the state that you're attempting adverse possession in. So there is also a third rule, which is directly opposite of the main rule of requiring intentional trespass. The trespasser must be completely innocent and must have made a good faith mistake, such as relying on an invalid or incorrect deed. And then they give another example. For example, in Iowa, which follows this good faith rule, a woman attempted to claim a strip of her neighbor's land by adverse possession. The court denied her claim because she knew it was not her property, even though she had treated the property as her own for 30 years. So again, in some states, we saw that earlier in Nebraska, a man did know the property wasn't his. He used it nevertheless and gained 8 acres of land because that was the law of the state of Nebraska. Iowa is right next to Nebraska, but in Iowa, you can't do that. In Iowa, you have to be innocent, quote unquote, which means when you go in court, you say you don't know that you were taking over somebody's land. If you say that you know it in Iowa, you will not be able to adversely possess a property in that way. So you have to be clear on the adverse possession laws in the state that you're in if you're looking to take property that is not yours and adversely possess it so that it can legally become your property, be that a house, be that acres of land, whatever it is, okay? The next criteria for adverse possession is actual, open, and notorious possession. Again, we're reading a government document. The trespasser must actually be in possession of the property and treat it as if he were an owner. That means you can make improvements on the house. Let's say if it's a house, you can change the locks. Let's say if it's land, you can build on it, put a fence around it, do what you would do with your own property. That's actual, open, and notorious. This means there must be a physical presence on the land. It's not enough for someone just to make a claim orally on writing of ownership. You've got to be there. The words open and notorious simply mean that it must be obvious to anyone, including any owner, who investigates that you're trespassing on their land. Actual physical possession is usually open and notorious. Someone out in the field harvesting crops is obvious, as is a person pruning a rose garden that she planted on a strip of the neighbor's backyard. So you just have to be obvious. You have to be openly using the land. You need to treat the land, the house, whatever you're adversely possessing, as if it were your own. Then there needs to be exclusive and continuous possession. These are legal definitions. Again, we're looking specifically at the state of California. We're looking at a government document that is explaining how you can adversely possess a property in California. We'll also look at Texas. We'll look at European law as well. And the purpose of this, again, is I was interested in making this video. I know about it. I haven't always, right? At some point I didn't know about adverse possession, but I've known about adverse possession for many, 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 many years. Okay. But I was interested in making this video. I would have never bothered to make this video except for when Cynthia made her video on the Moorish couple who was squatting in the mayor's family's home. I got so frustrated because as a person who operates as far outside of the system as I can, whose kids don't have birth certificates, social security cards, who advocate home and free birth, who encourage disengagement from the system, homeschooling, just as little engagement as possible with the government and the system, I get very frustrated when I listen to sovereign citizens. I get very frustrated when I listen to people like the Moorish. I get very frustrated because I recognize that their rhetoric is very dangerous, and that there is a proper way to do things, and you don't need to have all of the extra stuff. Like I said, I feel a lot of these movements are CIA backed. I really do. And I feel that they're dangerous because I think that it's controlled opposition. A lot of people involved in these movements are very revolutionary in mindset, and it's much better to get them involved in a bogus movement than to actually have them understand the law and to actually have them engage in revolutionary act. And so it's frustrating. So I normally wouldn't be giving a tutorial in adverse possession. This is information I would have kept to myself or taught to my kids or, spoke about with my friends or, my close circle. But because of, what I saw on Cynthia's channel, I was sparked to just do a genuine video on adverse possession, something legitimate, right? You guys, something legal, something that, explains it in a way that's factual, using government documents and actual law, and with no extra weird stuff attached to it. Okay. So anyway, exclusive and continuous possession. So you just need to be there. The trespasser must possess the land exclusively and without interruption for the statutory time period. You can find out how many years are required in your state from the chart below. Ooh, they give us a chart. Let's see. Let's go down to the chart. Did they give us a chart? Y'all, this is a long document. I don't see the chart. They lied. Oh, yeah, they gave us a chart. Wait, no. Oh, they lied. They didn't give us a chart. That would have done all the work for us. I was going to say California is the GOAT if they really gave us a chart, because if we had a chart, we wouldn't have to look up adverse possession laws in every state, but they didn't give us a chart. They lied. So exclusive and continuous possession. A trespasser can't give up the use of the property in such a way that he no longer acts as the owner and then return it to and count the time that it was abandoned. That wouldn't be continuous possession. So you have to stand firm in your possession for whatever that period of time is that's required by your state before you can truly claim someone else's property as your own. The person trespassing must be the only person occupying the property. He can't share possession with strangers or the owner. So this means that you can't start a homeless camp on the property, okay? It's got to be you. You've got to be the person that owns it. Now, the exception to this would be if you're doing an easement, which means that you gain the right to use part of someone else's property. But we don't want to gain easement. That could be a whole nother video. We want adverse possession. We want to make someone else's land, someone else's building, someone else's home, someone else's property, our property, without actually going through any sort of real estate transaction, without paying them any money. If one person uses the property for a while, then leaves, and another shows up for a while, the two times cannot be combined. The possession has not been exclusive by one person. If, however, the trespasser actually sells or gives the property to someone, the recipient becomes the adverse possessor, and the years that the first trespasser spent occupying the land count for the new one's claim. This is very, very key. This means that I could occupy 12 acres of land, and if I need to make a move, I can sell it for $1 or $10 or $100 to the next Black person. They can occupy it. We're paying our property taxes, and as quick as 5 years, we could have 12 acres of land through adverse possession, because my time and their time could be combined only if I sell it to them. Remember, I have to treat the property as if it is my own, if I cannot continuously possess it. That would be a way to get around that. They give an example. Joe occupied part of someone else's land for 10 years. He then sold his land, including the part that was not legally his, to Adam, who stayed for 10 years. In his state's adverse possession statute requires 20 years of occupancy. Adam has met the 20-year requirement through tacking. On the other hand, if Joe stopped trespassing before Adam bought the property and started his own trespassing, the 10 years of Joe's trespass don't count for Adam. Payment of property taxes. Some states require the trespasser to have paid the property taxes on the property for the statutory time period. If all other requirements are met except tax payment, a court will usually grant prescriptive easement, which is not what we want. We don't want prescriptive easement, okay, to use the property to the trespasser instead of ownership through adverse possession. But again, we don't want easement. We want adverse possession. That's the goal, is to make the property yours, not to get the right to use somebody else's property. Although I can see situations where getting prescriptive easement would be beneficial, but that would not be ultimately the goal. So it's good to understand how people can fight back against this. So let's look at what the owner can do if they want to fight back. A landowner who doesn't keep an eye on his property can lose it. Remember, we're reading a government document. We're looking for those houses that are just sitting. We're looking for pieces of land that you've driven by and like nothing's going on with the land for a long time. These are opportunities to adversely possess a property and gain property at no cost to you, except in the case of property taxes. The goal of paying the property tax would be that you would be able to acquire the property sooner. And you'd actually be surprised how many people buy land and just let it sit. Nobody should allow the boundaries to be redrawn by inattention and inaction. So an inattentive, inactive owner is our favorite kind of owner, because that's how you can adversely possess their property. And if you're looking to prevent this for yourself, you can check your property taxes. See if anybody's been paying your property taxes, because if they are, they're probably making a move for adverse possession. Some people put up posted or no trespassing signs to keep people off their properties. Signs can alert a trespasser that the land belongs to someone else, but are not a protection against adverse possession. So you don't have to be deterred by no trespassing signs. You can advise no trespassing. unless state law requires the trespasser to believe that he is on his own land to make a claim. And that goes back to Iowa's law. But we want to stay away from states like that because nobody has time for those games. Signs are never a substitute for periodic inspection of the property. It is easy to imagine someone tacking up a few signs and returning 25 years later or never, and a new buyer returning instead. By that time, the signs are long gone and a neighbor may have shifted over onto the land. So this is how people lose their land. And this is how you can take people's land. Now, we're not going to get into how people can defend themselves anymore because I'm not trying to give a defense against adverse possession class, but that's adverse possession in California. Okay. We're going to skip over easements. I'm going to go ahead and in the description box, I will post this if you want to read it and peruse it, if you're interested in adverse possession of a property. But be clear. Understand the law as you go about it. And I would not be looking at a house that somebody might come back to. The minimum it's going to take you to adversely possess a property legally is 5 years, right? It's going to take you at least 5 years, which means that you're not going to be trying to a house that somebody's going to sell. You're not going to be doing this to a house where somebody might come back the next year. You're going to waste your time. The goal is to go for that abandoned lot, that piece of land out in the middle of nowhere, that building that is just sitting, that you've seen just sitting there. This would be great for places like Detroit where properties literally just sit for years, where you know the market is going down and nothing is moving. But remember, you have to check by the state. And the goal is to target the states that have the loosest adverse possession laws, where you can adversely possess aggressively. You can do it knowingly, so you don't have to say that you think that the property is yours. They're looking for people that know that the property is not theirs, like California. And that if you pay property taxes, you can do it within 5 years. Because anything longer than that, you run the risk of not winning your case if the owner tries to fight back against the adverse possession. So I'm not going to dig too deep into Texas law, but I want to just come here to Texas's government website to show you that you can look up the adverse possession laws in each state. So this is a real thing that can be done. And on this page, and I'll post the link to this too, it talks about real and personal property that's been abandoned. It talks about adverse possession and taxes. I mean, it just goes on and on and on in Texas. Let me go ahead and I'll just click that one really quick. So because we're all in different states, what this will look like is going to be different for each person. So again, I'm on LoneStarLand.com, but the page that led me there is a Texas.gov webpage, okay? So it's under their explained in plain English section, and the government is providing you links to people who they feel have explained their law in plain English. But of course, you're going to want to have the statute for it as well. So I just want to be clear that we did start on the government website and we're clicking a link that the government is offering us to further expound on their adverse possession law. So here it says, as we know, legitimate adverse possession claims are rare, mostly because people don't know that you can engage in adverse possession. Again, this has nothing to do with being a sovereign citizen. This has nothing to do with the de facto government. This has nothing to do with the uppercase versus lowercase u, nothing to do with any of that foolishness, okay? This is just straight up law that we're discussing. But it can happen. So in Texas, intent is important. In Texas, you must be unambiguous with your intention to appropriate the property from the recorded owner. Hostile intent is needed in Texas. And it goes on. And again, I'm not going to read through every single state. I just wanted to demonstrate that adverse possession is a real thing, but it's not tied to Moorish movement. It's not tied to Freeman anything. It's not, you know? And I really don't trust these movements. I really feel that they're CIA backed. I really feel that they're a way to control people who would be the would-be revolutionaries, right? It gives them something to busy themselves with that's not actual revolution. And so I feel that this is dangerous, but I wanted to touch on how these movements take small pieces of truth and they twist and they morph them into something that ultimately is really a danger to the participants of the movement. And I think that this is essential also because, y'all, we can't play these games with the government, okay? There's either going to be revolutionary action or there's not. And if there's not going to be any real revolutionary action, then the best thing for us to do is to play the game and to understand the rules of the game as these people use it for themselves. And the last thing that I want to touch on is just to show you how these adverse possession laws we have in the United States, these are the laws that Europeans followed as they went throughout the world and took other people's land. They just started using other people's land as if it were their own. That's adverse possession. That's what happened to South Africa. And I just wanted to demonstrate that this stems from Europe. So here we are at gov.uk. And it goes on to explain how squatters can engage in adverse possession. This is white people telling each other how they can take land. In the UK, you can apply after 2 years. Again, if the owner has not tried to remove you, if the property has not been reclaimed, if you're still in possession of the property. So I'm only coming to the UK law because I want to show, and this can morph into a whole nother conversation, which is the mind of whiteness, right? Adverse possession is the tool which white people have used to justify them spreading and colonizing throughout the world. Adverse possession is colonization on a small scale. And so I think it is interesting, and that's why I was so fascinated when Cynthia did the video. It made me want to do this video because when we start to look at the bigger picture, here, let me go ahead and let me just stop sharing with you guys. I think adverse possession is interesting to me, not just because it can help you acquire property, but also because it is a look into how the Europeans view the world. And adverse possession is how they've spread themselves throughout the earth, how they justify keeping land. Adverse possession is why the whites in South Africa feel they need to be paid for land that was essentially stolen. They feel that because they adversely possessed it for many years. They've sold it, they've treated the land as their own, and so the land effectively becomes their own. And so that is how their minds work. And because their minds work in that way, and that is their intent, and that's how they spread themselves throughout the earth, built into our system are laws that allow us to do the same thing that they do, which is take a person's land without their consent. And so, although I feel do the same thing that the Moorish people, obviously, they're tripping, y'all. Although I feel that they're tripping, I definitely wanted to just talk about adverse possession and how we can utilize that for ourselves, how we can utilize adverse possession to really gain land without paying for it, because in every state there are laws that afford for adverse possession. King Surge said, why am I not on Nyla's right now? I don't do every single one of Nyla's lives. I did a live with Nyla earlier. I don't have to show up for every single solitary live, right? Solving the race problem, I'm actually live. I don't think the Moorish will come here because I'm not about to be here much longer, y'all. But I did want to come and I wanted to talk about it. So I called it the dangers of Moorish sovereign citizen rhetoric. But honestly, it was more, it turned into more a tutorial on adverse possession. Ultimately, all that I really wanted to say is this. I wanted to say that you don't have to be a free man on the land. You don't have to be a Moorish person. You don't have to get caught up in these CIA-backed movements to utilize these laws. And it's probably better for you that you not be on some weird stuff if you do try to engage in something like adverse possession. But I think that with regard to what am I upset with you? You have a wrench. What are you talking about? Why would you think have I said something to you that would make you think I'm upset with you? I'm not upset with you. I don't know what you're talking about. But I'll probably slightly rename the title to the utilization of adverse possession or something like that. Again, this is one of those lives that aren't going to be hugely popular. I think I'll be doing one tomorrow. People will be happier with, but I think that this actually is useful information because there is a lot of land out there that is owned that nobody touches for years and years. And that land is ripe for the taking. You can adversely possess the land. It can become your land. That is a legal thing that you can do. And I would encourage you guys to, acclimate yourselves to, moving in a way that helps you understand the laws as they stand. Because it helps us to understand the system that we're working in. Again, like I said, if there's not going to be revolutionary action, like an actual revolution, then the only other thing you can do is learn how to get ahead in the system that the whites have established for us, and understand how they move. And so adverse possession is an example of a law that white people have used to justify their colonization of many places. And it's a law that you are able to use as an individual, as I demonstrated, to get a home for yourself, to get acreage and land for your family. These are things that you can do. But you do need to look at the law of your state. You do need to engage in adverse possession in states that have the loosest adverse possession laws possible, preferably states where you can do it in as little as 5 years so that it's not cumbersome for you to do it. We looked at how you can have adverse possession where it's continuous, like you can pass it from one person to the next so that it's not all on you. The angst isn't completely on you to possess that property for that period of time. But I did want to touch on this. And so, yeah, I'm thankful that Cynthia threw that video up because I was like, that was very inspirational to me to want to talk about adverse possession because I know it's something a lot of people don't know about. And it is something legitimate. Those Moorish people, they I don't know what they were doing. They were tripping. But with that said, y'all, I'm going to go. I know that this is actually pretty late for me, but this is when I felt like doing it. I didn't feel like doing it before then. So I will talk to you guys later. Tomorrow, I will be starting a series that is actually going to be really, really hard on me. And it's going to be hard on a lot of you too. But I really want to promote unity throughout the diaspora. And so I'm going to get into a discussion about globally what the current plight of our people are globally. And we're going to see a pattern of oppression and a pattern of tactics with regard to Black people on a global scale that I hope will really put into perspective why it is very dangerous for us to fragment ourselves from the rest of the diaspora. So with that said, I am going to get out of here, you guys, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.